Somewhere around the age of 50, a strange thing starts happening to men all over the world. The energy that used to be there without asking for it. The kind that got a man through a full workday and still left something in the tank for the evening, starts to quietly disappear. Mornings feel heavier. Afternoons come with a wall of fatigue that wasn't there 10 years earlier. And most men blame the same thing. They blame testosterone. It has become the default explanation, repeated so often it feels like fact. Low energy after 50, low motivation, low drive. Testosterone gets the blame almost automatically, and for some men, hormonal changes are genuinely part of the picture. But here is what rarely gets said out loud. For a large number of men, testosterone is not the main driver of the fatigue they are feeling. It is a convenient answer, but not always the correct one. The real story is quieter, more mechanical, and far more within a man's control than a hormone panel might suggest. And by the end of this video, the exact combination of everyday factors that are silently draining energy in men over 50 will be laid out clearly, including the one most overlooked factor that even experienced men rarely think to question. Stay through this, because the fourth factor on this list is the one that surprises people the most, and it has nothing to do with age at all. Why the testosterone explanation falls. Short testosterone naturally declines with age. That part is well established. Levels drop gradually, often by roughly 1% per year starting in a man's 30s. But gradual decline of that kind rarely explains a sudden, noticeable drop in daily energy. A slow, steady biological process does not usually produce the kind of fatigue that hits like a wall in the middle of the afternoon. What actually tends to produce that kind of fatigue are changes that happen much faster. Changes in sleep, in movement, in blood sugar regulation, and in the body's basic maintenance systems. These are the factors that shift quickly, often without a man noticing, and they compound on top of one another until the fatigue feels mysterious. Even though the causes were never hidden, they were simply never labeled correctly. So before reaching for a hormone explanation, it helps to look at what is actually changing in a man's daily life. Once he crosses 50, that is where the real answers tend to live. 4 everyday factors quietly draining energy after 51. Sleep quality, not just sleep quantity. Many men in their 50s and 60s technically spend enough hours in bed. 7 hours, sometimes 8. On paper, that looks fine, but the quality of that sleep often changes significantly with age. Even when the quantity does not. Deep sleep, the stage responsible for physical repair and hormone regulation, naturally decreases with age. Sleep also becomes lighter and more fragmented, with more frequent brief awakenings that a man may not even remember the next morning. The result is a night that feels complete, but does not actually deliver complete recovery. This matters because deep sleep is when the body carries out much of its repair work, tissue recovery, immune regulation, and metabolic housekeeping. When that stage shortens, a man can sleep a full night and still wake up feeling like the recovery never happened. Over weeks and months, that deficit builds quietly, and it gets misread as simple aging rather than a specific, addressable sleep pattern. 2. Muscle mass and the hidden cost of sitting. Starting around the age of 30, adults naturally begin losing a small percentage of muscle mass per decade if that muscle is not actively maintained. That loss tends to accelerate after 50, especially in men who have become more sedentary through work, retirement, or simply a slower daily pace. Muscle tissue is metabolically active. It is one of the primary systems responsible for regulating blood sugar and supporting steady, even energy throughout the day. As muscle mass declines, the body becomes less efficient at managing that regulation. The practical result is a pattern many men recognize instantly. once it is described: a heavy, foggy crash a few hours after eating, followed by a temporary lift, followed by another crash. That roller coaster feels like fatigue, but it is often a signal of declining metabolic efficiency tied directly to muscle loss, not an unavoidable part of getting older. 3. Chronic low-grade inflammation. This is a factor most men have never had explained to them in plain language, largely because it does not show up as an obvious symptom the way pain or illness does. Chronic low-grade inflammation is a slow background immune response that tends to increase with age, often linked to diet, excess body fat, poor sleep, and long-term stress. Unlike an infection or an injury, this kind of inflammation does not announce itself. It does not cause fever or visible swelling. Instead, it produces something far more subtle, a persistent sense of heaviness and mental fog that many men simply describe as just feeling off. Research has consistently linked elevated inflammatory markers with reduced energy, slower cognitive processing, and a general sense of physical dullness, exactly the kind of fatigue that gets blamed on age when its actual roots are diet and lifestyle patterns that can be adjusted. 4. The overlooked factor, under-stimulation. Not overwork. Here is the one that catches most men off guard, because it runs opposite to what they expect. Many men assume fatigue after 50 comes from doing too much work, too much responsibility, too much stress. For a significant number of men, especially those easing into retirement or a lighter work schedule, the opposite is closer to the truth. The brain and body are built for engagement. When the structure of a demanding career fades and is not replaced with something equally engaging, a project, a physical goal, a skill being learned, a purpose pulling a man out of bed, the result is not relaxation. It is a kind of low-grade under-stimulation that the body actually experiences as fatigue. Motivation and physical energy are closely linked in the brain's reward circuitry. When there is less to move toward, that circuitry quiets down, and the body follows its lead. This is why some retired men report feeling more tired at 65 with an open schedule than they did at 45 with a demanding job. It is rarely about hormones. It is about a system that runs best with a clear target to aim at and quietly underperforms without one. Bringing the 4 factors together, none of these 4 factors operate alone. Poor sleep accelerates muscle loss by disrupting recovery. Muscle loss worsens blood sugar swings, which in turn increases inflammation. Inflammation further disrupts sleep quality, and a lack of daily purpose reduces the motivation to address any of the other 3, because addressing them takes energy that already feels in short supply. That is the real mechanism behind fatigue after 50, not a single dramatic hormonal cliff, but 4 ordinary everyday factors reinforcing each other in a slow, quiet loop. And because each factor on its own seems minor, most men never step back far enough to see the full pattern. They just feel tired and assume it is the price of getting older. It usually is not what actually helps. The encouraging part of this picture is that every one of these 4 factors responds to fairly simple, consistent changes, not extreme ones. Sleep quality tends to improve with a consistent bedtime, reduced screen exposure in the hour before sleep, and a cool, dark sleeping environment. These changes specifically support deeper, more restorative sleep stages, rather than simply increasing total hours in bed. Muscle mass responds strongly to resistance-based movement. Even modest amounts performed consistently, 2 or 3 short sessions a week involving bodyweight movements or light resistance training can meaningfully slow age-related muscle loss and improve blood sugar regulation, inflammation, tends to ease with dietary patterns rich in vegetables, fiber, and omega-3 sources, combined with reduced intake of highly processed foods, alongside the sleep and movement changes already mentioned, since all three systems are connected. And the fourth factor, the one about purpose and stimulation, often responds to something surprisingly simple, identifying one ongoing project, skill, or goal that requires consistent engagement. This does not need to be dramatic. A structured hobby, a physical challenge, a course, a role in a community, something the brain can track, progress toward tends to restore a noticeable amount of daily energy, often faster than any of the physical changes alone. A final note, none of this means hormonal changes are irrelevant. For some men, testosterone or other hormonal factors genuinely are part of the picture, and that possibility is worth discussing with a doctor, particularly if fatigue is severe, sudden, or paired with other symptoms. But for a large number of men, the fatigue that arrives after 50 has less to do with a single hormone and more to do with these four ordinary, addressable patterns working together. This video is intended for general educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Any man experiencing persistent or severe fatigue should speak with a qualified healthcare provider to rule out underlying medical conditions. Understanding these four factors will not undo the effects of aging, but it does mean that a great deal of the fatigue blamed on getting older is, in fact, something men have far more influence over than they have been told.